Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm Trudy Stern. My guest today is someone who walked out of Wall Street and into the most crowded and consequential mayoral primary New York City has seen in decades. Whitney Tilson is a former hedge fund manager, a respected investor, and a longtime thought leader on education reform, political policy, public policy, and the future of American democracy. Now he's running for mayor of New York City in a field packed with high profile names from former Governor Andrew Cuomo to radical left wing candidates like Zoran Mamdani. But Whitney isn't in this race to make a statement, he's in it to make a difference. And he's been very clear. One of his driving motivations is to defeat Mamdani, whose extreme socialist platform and openly anti Semitic views pose a real threat to the future of this city and to the values that we all hold so dear. Whitney Tilson is calling out hate, standing up for truth, and refusing to let New York fall into the hands of those who legitimize terror and demonize the Jewish people. He's bold, outspoken, and not afraid to challenge the political machine. And I'm honored to have him with us today. Whitney, welcome to Nothing But the Truth.
Thank you, Trudy. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Whitney, tell us why you are running for mayor. You seem like you were very successful in your other life. Well, why would you choose this?
Well, sometimes I think a momentary burst of insanity, but in all seriousness, I'm a lifelong Democratic Party activist. I grew up around the world, child of teachers who met and married in the Peace Corps. Spent most of my childhood in Tanzania and Nicaragua. I've always tried to make a difference in the world, and I saw back in November after the election, I think voters were repudiating the Democratic Party. We had gotten hijacked by lefty extremists and allowed them to define our party as weak and woke. We're not doing a very good job managing the cities and states that we control, and I would put New York City at the top of that list. At the time, it was, the announced candidates were sort of a bunch of pretty lefty career politicians, and Andrew Cuomo wasn't in the race. And so, I saw a lane for an outsider business person like Mike Bloomberg was, and I thought he was one of our city's greatest mayors. So threw my hat in the ring to give voters a choice.
Well, since that moment of throwing your hat in the ring, lots has happened, right?
I'll say.
Um, so, for one thing, Andrew Cuomo entered the race. And how did that change? That changed the whole field.
Yeah, well, he has 100% name recognition, and I started with 0% name recognition. He has an advantage in that sense over everyone. In on a policy basis, I would say he and I are more in the center lane, and then there's sort of lefties scrambling toward the center, and then there's one far lefty who made the politically astute and I think authentic decision. He really is a radical socialist, and he hasn't tried to run away from it. And Zoran Mamdani has run a very clever campaign, and it's really come down, if you believe the polls, to a Cuomo Mamdani horse race. And anything can happen in the last couple weeks, but it looks like it's going to boil down to those two candidates.
So, tell me about Mamdani. I know that you've been very vocal in the press about him. Tell our listeners your perspective on Zoran Mamdani.
Yes, he's a 33-year-old state assemblyman, a radical socialist, a leader of the Democratic Socialists of America. This is a group that has tremendous hostility toward Israel. He wants to abolish capitalism in areas of crime and etc. Has called to disarm, defund, and dismantle the police, open our jails, etc. So it's really a radical agenda. Mamdani, though, is, I would say, a wolf in sheep's clothing, or call it him, he's the Trojan horse for the DSA, in that he is incredibly charming, charismatic, a great public speaker. He's run a superb campaign. So he's very dangerous because he comes across as, just a really likable, sort of lefty guy, but not radical. And so I have really, in many ways, made it my mission as a candidate to let New Yorkers know the truth about his radical views and even more radical people who he associates with.
So let's start with his radical views. Give us some examples of the things that he has said or done um, that characterize him as that.
Well, of most interest to your audience, I suspect, is his views about Israel. He is quite open that his fundamental defining issue that got him into politics and has defined him ever since, as back to his college days, was one of the founders of Students for Justice for Palestine. So he would say it's pro-Palestinian and he's just in favor of equal rights for everyone. But in fact, if you look at his record, he has denied as recently as a few days ago. I guess I don't know whether it's to his credit or not, but he has been quite consistent over the years. Denied Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, has regularly accused Israel of genocide and being an apartheid state, has been a leader of the BDS movement, which I view as anti-Semitic efforts to boycott Israel because they only target Israel. He has threatened to arrest Netanyahu if he comes to New York City. And so, these are all facts that I called him out for on the debate stage on the mayoral forum in the past week. And he argues he doesn't disavow his earlier statements, but argues that he is, just expressing sympathy with the plight of Palestinian civilians and so forth. But he seems to have an obsession just with Israel because he does not call out human rights abuses in China or Sudan or Saudi Arabia or Syria or anywhere else. He is solely obsessed with demonizing Israel.
I think he also stated that he doesn't recognize Israel as a Jewish state.
That's correct. He has denied Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. He has said he I think his exact words are, "I accept Israel's right to exist as a state with equal rights for all," whatever the heck that means.
So this is very troubling, and the fact that he is gaining in the polls. So what do the latest polls show us?
Well, as recently as an hour ago, a new poll came out, as the very first poll that came out that shows him with a lead over Cuomo. It's has a questionable methodology in that it does not factor in ranked choice voting, which is in fact what we have coming up with early voting starting June 14th for 9 days, and then election day or primary day is June 24th. So this is the polls, though, consistently have been showing Cuomo's lead at coming down to a two-person race after multiple rounds of ranked choice voting. 2 months ago, Cuomo was up by 30 points. A month ago, he was up by 20 points. A week ago, he was up by 10 points, let's call it. And the latest poll shows him down by 4 points. If you ask me if the election were held today, I don't think Mamdani would win. I think this latest poll is a little bit of an outlier. It didn't it used more text than phone calls, which tends to favor the younger voters of Mamdani, et cetera. But we should all be really, really worried. The betting sites, as of this moment, have Cuomo 60% likely to win, Mamdani 40%, and nobody else with any chance. And so that is down from well over 90% as recently as a couple weeks ago.
Wow. Tell us about ranked
Yes.
choice voting. Could you run through that and explain to the listeners how that works?
Sure. It means that you can rank up to 5 candidates. There are 11 people on the ballot, and in rank order. And the way it works is that if a candidate does not get 50% of the first place votes, then the candidate who got the fewest first place votes is knocked out in the first round, and whoever voted that candidate first, their second, third, fourth, and fifth votes go to the remaining candidates, and so forth through each round until one candidate reaches 50%. The polling models that have been done for this race show the last poll that showed ranked choice voting had Cuomo edging out Mamdani in two different polls, one by 2 points, one by 12 points, in something like the 8th up to the 11th round of ranked choice voting. So, each of the other candidates, of the 11 candidates in the field, each of them gets knocked out each round until it's down to two people. And at that point, in both those polls, Cuomo edged out Mamdani by a narrow margin. So the I'll anticipate your follow-up question, which is, okay, how do what should a voter do in
Well, wait,
this
before we get to
case?
the follow up,
Yes,
I want to fully understand this ranked
yes,
choice. So let's say, for example, there was only three people in the race, Mamdani, Cuomo, and Tilson.
yes,
And I rank Tilson number one, Cuomo number two, and that's it. Then,
right.
okay, so walk me through how that works if in a ranked choice.
Well, if so, let's say the polls are correct, and I would be trailing those other two candidates in the polling today. So in the first round, let's say, well, I mean, I'm low single digits at this point, so the math doesn't exactly work. But assuming that I am ranked third, I am the lowest seed. I'm the candidate with the fewest first place votes. I would be knocked out, and everyone who voted Cuomo number two on my ballot, all those votes would go to Cuomo. So I'm encouraging people to vote for me because I would still like to win, and I'm not a quitter, even though I know it's a very long shot at this point based on the polls. But the point is there is no harm to if you want Cuomo to get in over Mamdani, it doesn't hurt to vote me one, because as long as you vote Cuomo two, because if and when I get knocked out, all the Cuomo votes go to him as if you had just ranked him number one.
I see. That's pretty clear. Um, and
Yes, the complexity here is keep in mind, this is just the primary. So the general election in November is not ranked choice. So there is both Cuomo and Mamdani may run as independents, whoever loses the primary, but it's obviously a big advantage to having won the Democratic primary. But keep in mind, the current mayor, Eric Adams, has already filed to run as an independent. And then you have Curtis Sliwa, who got 28% of the vote last time, as the Republican nominee. So there is a scenario where without ranked choice voting, where someone doesn't have to get to 50% to win. So Mamdani could get 40%. Cuomo, Adams, and Sliwa split up the remaining 60%, even though all of those voters don't want Mamdani. And Mamdani becomes our next mayor with only 40% of the vote. So that won't happen in ranked choice voting. Someone's got to get to 50%. But keep in mind, in the Democratic primary, historically, it's very low turnout. Only 26% of registered Democrats turned out last time. And keep in mind, anyone registered as an independent or Republican can't vote in the primary.
wait a minute. If you are, so that is something that I did not know. If you're registered as an independent, you cannot vote in the Democratic primary.
That is correct. And there was a big push, especially in the Jewish community, people who recognized the threat of Mamdani early on. According to the New York State crazy voting rules, you had to change your registration to Democrat by February 14th. Now, if you are currently not registered to vote at all in New York, you have until Saturday, June 14th, to register. Then you can register as a Democrat. But if you are already registered in New York City as a voter, so let's say you live out you during the pandemic, you were out on Long Island or somewhere outside the city, and your voting is out there. You can switch it back to the city, assuming you're now a city resident, and you move back to the city, but didn't get around to switching your vote. It's not too late to switch your vote and vote here. But you got to do so by June 14th. But if you're already registered here in the city, it's too late to change. You must be a registered Democrat to vote. So this is a whole another thing I've been, fighting against, which is, we have this closed primary. It's in an off year. It's in the middle of the summer. It's deliberately designed by the Democratic Party machine to suppress the vote. And so, the special interest groups can elect our elected representatives. If you wonder why the elected representatives here in the city, not just the mayor, but the city council, public advocate, comptroller don't seem to be looking out for the interests of New Yorkers. It's because only 5% of New Yorkers elect them.
So you raised a very interesting point, and a point that I happen to know many people who fall into that. If a person was out on Long Island or Connecticut or New Jersey down by the shore for pandemic or for the summer and ended up registering to vote there during that time, they can now register at their New York residence.
That's correct. I mean, you obviously have to be a New York resident and qualified to vote in New York. You can switch, but you haven't switched it. If you're not registered in the city but are eligible to vote in the city, you can switch. The deadline is June 14th. It's really quite easy to do. If you can just do it online. All you have to do is just Google, register to vote in New York City. Boom, you can do it online in 5 minutes.
That is amazing. So, to all of our listeners, you can still register to vote in the Democratic primary. You have until June 14th, which I believe is Saturday.
Yep.
And you can go online, as Whitney just stated, go to tell us again how you do that.
Well, I don't have the website off the top of my head, but literally just Google register to vote in New York City and it'll come right up.
And then that's it. You can now vote.
And then you're eligible to vote. And in fact, then you have to vote in person, and you have 9 days to do it early voting from June 14th to the 22nd. Then there's one rest day where you can't vote, which is Monday, the 23rd. And then about 70% of people choose to vote on election day in person, which is Tuesday, June 24th.
Wow. Okay. I think that's really valuable and helpful information. And I think it may impact a lot of our listeners to be able to vote in this primary. If they do not vote in the primary, they can still change their voting and to the
Well, you
city.
don't have to change your registration. If you're registered as an independent or a Republican or a Democrat, doesn't matter. You can vote in the general.
Right. But you'd have to be registered in the city. Again,
Yes.
people might not be registered in the city.
Yes,
So
and whether you're a Democrat or you may be fed up with the Democratic Party and may consider yourself an independent. You may have voted for Trump. You consider yourself a Republican. It doesn't matter. You should register as a Democrat if you're going to vote here in New York City because the elections are largely decided by who wins the Democratic primary. And so, I'm a Democrat, but if I lived in, Oklahoma or some red state or and city, where Republicans outnumbered Democrats dramatically, and it was the primary that mattered, I'd register as a Republican so that my vote mattered.
very clever. I see why you were such a successful businessman. And I really do wish you the best of luck here. Tell us about your platform. Many people really haven't heard so much about Whitney Tilson. I'm very happy to meet you, and I would love to hear a little bit about your ideas for how you see the city being run.
Sure. Well, big picture, I'm running in the outsider business person, just run the city better. We have the highest taxes in the country. We're by far the richest city in the world. So we've got an enormous city budget, and the career politicians don't run it very well. I thought Mike Bloomberg coming in as an outsider, it's a combination of two things. One, having a business background and knowing how to manage things and bringing in fresh people who know how to run things better and more efficiently. But it's also, I think, a question of not being beholden to the special interests that pretty much, even the good politicians, they owe their political job and future to a handful of special interests in what is a fairly undemocratic system where only 25% of only registered Democrats elect our representatives. So there's a sort of a structural problem as well, not just having a background just in government. So a guy like Zoran Mamdani is 33 years old, has never held a job in the private sector in his life. He's just bopped around between different nonprofit and government jobs. The idea of handing him the keys to what is, I think, rightly called the second most difficult job in the world is just preposterous. on an experience basis, forgetting he then brings in this crazy, dangerous ideology of abolishing capitalism, abolishing the police, and his divestment from Israel. I was actually looking into this. New York City government does a lot of business with Israeli companies in cybersecurity, things like that. He's basically said he'll divest everything. It would be very damaging to our city. Forgetting the fact that he's basically been inciting these mobs that have made us all feel less safe.
I don't think he will do anything with regard to the encampments on the college campuses and
He
send.
said explicitly he would not allow the NYPD to assist in cases where these campus mobs overwhelm campus security.
And how does he feel about sanctuary city, New York being a sanctuary city?
Well, actually, I mean, he and I actually, as a Democrat, agree that, Trump and I should not be, we should not be cooperating with, showing up at schools and hospitals and places like that, trying to round up illegal immigrants who are working hard and obeying the law, and in many cases have been here quite a while, have American-born children, et cetera. Where I think the area we would differ is he would have no cooperation at all. Whereas I think even with the Trump administration, which I'm very skeptical of, and I think they, in many ways, in the area of immigrants, have been behaving in a lawless way, and even people who are entitled to due process, green card holders, et cetera, have been violated. I do think we should cooperate in the area of a certain percentage of the people who are not U.S. citizens, be they green card holders, student visas, here on asylum or temporary protected status or whatever, a certain percentage of those folks have turned to crime and gangs and so forth, are wanted for crimes in other parts of the U.S. or country, and we should be cooperating with that. I think we Democrats really lose the narrative when our Trump derangement syndrome goes too far in the other direction. And there's not only the perception but the reality that we're protecting criminals and endangering average Americans. We helped by going too far, and particularly open borders, which is what happened effectively in the first 3 years of the Biden administration, cost us the election.
Well, you sound like a very reasonable, very centrist Democrat, which are the Democrats that won in November, the Democrats that were not woke, not all the way to the left. I hope that that will be true with this race as well, with this mayoral race. What would you say to the listeners who have problems with Governor Cuomo? They feel his sexual harassment case
Sure.
was troubling, or that he wasn't effective during COVID, or he was counterproductive, actually.
Yes.
How do you address that?
I would acknowledge that he has a well-known history, and there are a number of reasons why people might not be excited to pull the lever for him. What I would say is that in the real world that we all live in, and in the voting booth, we are not always presented with someone we're incredibly excited about on the one hand, and somebody we're really afraid of or really don't like on the other hand. Sometimes there are two candidates that neither of which you're really excited about, but one of those two candidates is going to be running the city for the next 4, if not 8 years, right? And so you got to be a grown-up, and you have to recognize that you don't always have easy choices. Sometimes they're harder choices. In this case, though, I don't think it's a really hard choice. Whatever concerns you have about Andrew Cuomo, Zoran Mamdani is much, much, much worse. Certainly in terms of friendliness and support of the Jewish community in general and our relationship with Israel. But in terms of maintaining New York's vibrancy as the center of global commerce and trade and entrepreneurship and innovation and technology, small business growth, et cetera, in that area, in the area of crime and safety, And just, I mean, it's almost laughable to put a 33-year-old kid who's just had a handful of part-time jobs basically in a few years in the assembly where he basically got nothing done, uh, hand him the keys of this city over someone who, love him or hate him, he's got a lot of experience. He's competent. He can manage a city of this size. And I would say, to the extent that he has a lot of people don't like him because he's sort of, I don't know, a bully and is vindictive or whatever would be the argument against him. I'm like, those characteristics are sort of an asset, having that reputation, if not reality, when you're trying to get things done in a very, fractious city where you got to play hardball sometimes to get anything done.
You make a very good case for him, and yet Mamdani seems to be rising in the polls. I don't understand it. Do you have any clarity on that?
Sure. He's run a great campaign. He's got a very simple message. Free buses, free childcare, city-run grocery stores, if not free groceries, city subsidized groceries, free everything. And we're going to borrow $100 billion and build a lot of affordable housing. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to let landlords of half the apartments in New York City raise rent by $1 over 4 years. And so it's sort of a socialist utopia that he's promising. And he says, we'll just raise some taxes on a few corporations, some rich people, and they'll pay for it all. So you don't even have to pay for it. That's a pretty compelling message, right? To the average voter who's really hurting in New York, thinks it's going in the wrong direction, and is struggling to afford to live here, right? Who doesn't like to be promised free everything that you don't have to pay for? In reality, though, you scratch a half an inch deep. And you don't even have to probe very far. He has no ability to pay for any of this. All of his tax increases to pay for this would have to go through Albany, which there's no appetite for. And in fact, he was an assembly member for 4 years and didn't propose a single bit of this because he knows it could never get done. So he's making all sorts of false promises he can never deliver on. But the things he can deliver on, which is controlling the police and their budget, and he could make us a lot less safe. He could stop protecting the million plus Jews who live in New York City, including my wife and daughters. By the way, I should have mentioned. While I'm not religious, I did the next best thing in terms of wasn't lucky enough to be born into the tribe, so I married into it. And my wife and I have raised three daughters here in the city, proudly Jewish, and we've been members of Central Synagogue for 25 years. So,
Wow.
this issue is very personal to me.
Um, you lay that out so well, and it seems so frightening because if people are going to listen to this, it is an appealing offer. Everything free. Fantastic. And who is going to pay for it? The rich people who, you know, you don't relate to and you don't like anyway. So
Right. And by the way, companies can move, people can move, wealthy people can move, and we're already seeing it. Our tax base, the tax base we've lost to Miami and Palm Beach is substantial, and there would just be a horrific flight of not just corporations and wealthy folks, but working class folks as well under Mayor Mamdani, and that would really decimate our tax base and ability to pay for even the things we're currently paying for, much less the pie in the sky stuff he's promising.
it seems like there are so many reasons why a Mayor Mamdani would be awful, um, not only for the Jewish community, but as you laid out, for anybody who values a safe place, a good place to raise your family. Uh, this would not be New York anymore. And
Right, and just a well-managed city. He has no ability to manage like this. I mean, literally until he got city matching money a few months ago and built up his campaign staff, he had never managed more than 5 people in his entire life. New York City has 306,000 employees, $115 billion budget.
Wow, to put that in the hands of a person who's never done anything and
Right,
who's 33 years old, never done anything. I mean,
right.
really frightening when you lay that out. Um, this has been unbelievably helpful. I would love a last message to our listeners, uh, you know, a last thought that you might have for them as we come closer to primary day.
Sure. Well, it's very simple. One, you absolutely must vote, like your city depends on it, because it does. And I hope you'll consider ranking me. I'd be flattered if you put me number one. But what's critical is to be very realistic that you must rank Andrew Cuomo. Ideally, rank me one, Cuomo two. Don't rank anybody else. But most importantly, don't put Mamdani anywhere on your ballot. And because whatever you got to put aside, I'm sure very legitimate concerns some people may have about Cuomo, and recognize that Mamdani, the threat of Mamdani is a whole different level. I would argue existential. So get involved, get motivated. You got 10 different days to vote, 9 days of early voting and election day. There's no excuse for not doing your democratic duty, assuming you're a registered Democrat in the city.
And if you are not a registered Democrat in the city, but have your residence in the city, but for whatever reason you're voting outside the city, you
Yes.
have until June 14th to actually register in the city as a Democrat and be able to vote in this election. And I urge anyone who falls into that category to do that. Um, Whitney, thank you so much for joining us today. You
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
amazing. Thank you for stepping up, for speaking out, for running for office with such clarity and purpose. We wish you the best of luck in this race and going forward. New York needs bold voices. You've made it clear that you're not afraid to take a stand when it matters most. To our listeners, this upcoming mayoral primary is not just another election, it's a turning point. If you're a registered Democrat or independent in New York City, your vote on June 24th and at early voting before could help decide the future direction of this city. Make sure you're registered, make sure you show up, and make sure you help spread the word to anyone else who can. Thank you for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern. You can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. on the radio. And if you missed any part of this show or want to listen to any of our past episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.